Hello and welcome to the Encephalitis Podcast. My name is Prav and I'm from Encephalitis International. Today we'll be hearing a story of encephalitis and volunteering. To find out more, I'm thrilled and grateful to be joined by Pauline Murray. Welcome to the podcast, Pauline.
Thank you. Delighted to be here and share my story.
Yeah, great to have you. There's so much to talk about because you're a nurse, you've been affected by encephalitis twice, you're a volunteer, you've given talks. So I want to start from the beginning. Can you tell us about how you got into nursing?
I went into nursing straight from school. I've always been interested in hospitals and medicine. It just felt a natural thing for me to do. I trained at my local nursing college, which was ideal from travelling point of view. And I've actually worked in the same hospital my whole career, which is quite unusual.
That's loyalty.
Yeah, yeah.
So then, so yeah, moving on to kind of what's your story with encephalitis?
I woke up one morning and I have the date ingrained in my brain. The 4th of January 2015, I woke up and um, had a normal day. I was training for a 10K run in Glasgow that I was doing. It was going to be the first one I'd done, so I was doing couch to 5K. And then I came in after my run, like it was probably early evening. The telephone rang. I went to answer it, and then I felt this palpitations in my heart was racing, and thought it was to do with the run I'd just done. I didn't think any more of it for a wee while, and then suddenly these feelings kind of became a bit more frequent, and I thought, this is a bit odd. And then over the course of maybe about 4 weeks, it had escalated um, to the point that I actually couldn't go to work anymore. I had sought medical advice um, from my GP and also spoke to colleagues because obviously I work as a nurse in an intensive care unit at that point and thought this isn't right. There's something not wrong. There's something wrong. I couldn't really get any answers at one point. There was a few favours pulled from my medical colleagues, and a few people could see that there was something not right. I saw a physician, and it was put down to stress, which is quite challenging when you know that the only reason you're stressed is because you know there's something wrong and you don't know what it is. And yeah, you don't feel you're getting the investigations that you need. That escalated to the point that I actually saw a surgeon and not a physician, which is unusual when it's a medical condition. And I got an MRI scan, and then things just escalated quickly after that because it was hugely abnormal. I had a large swelling on my hippocampus. I was admitted to the hospital I work in, which was difficult because obviously I'm used to being at the bedside and not the patient. They treated me initially for viral encephalitis till they could work out what was wrong. And by chance, a neurologist was visiting the hospital that day, seeing another patient in that ward, and he was asked to see me, and he was very quickly saying, "This isn't viral. There's something a bit more about this," and looking at my scans. And I said, "I want this patient in Glasgow, where the Centre of Neurology is for the west of Scotland." I was in a district general hospital. So I was hot-footed up to the Southern General Neurological Institute, where I spent 4 weeks in hospital, um, which was quite difficult for me. I was completely alert and awake and mobile during my experience. Sometimes I don't know if that was better or not because I was fully aware of what was going on, but very frightened. I was also very paranoid by this point. I'd been having deja vus prior to being admitted. And I knew there was something neurologically not right with me, but I didn't know what. That wasn't my area of expertise. Um, and at one point, they thought maybe I had a brain tumor. So that was pretty scary because the swelling was so large. My blood tests went to Oxford at that point because they didn't test in Scotland then. We've moved on a lot in 10 years. So we have, they took 4 weeks to come back, which felt like an eternity. And I didn't have treatment up to that point. I had a huge amount of investigations, which none of them came back positive MRI scans, just to confirm that I still had this swelling, various other tests, and I think every blood test that there was under the sun. I was home on pass. I was allowed home for the weekend, which was just fabulous to get into my own house and my own bed and my own home. And I got a phone call with the results from the neurologist to say that I tested positive. This is when I can get a wee bit upset, and it's okay.
Absolutely.
It was that day, the feeling is how I feel today. It was really emotional, and it was like a huge relief. And I'm sure other people will understand that have been through this. That wasn't going mad. It wasn't stress and anxiety, and there was actually something wrong with me. And we could actually say exactly what it was. And then I knew there was a treatment for it and that we could overcome it. So having that diagnosis was amazing for me, and I actually did burst into tears, but it was tears of happiness actually, which might sound a bit ironic, but for me that was a huge step forward. So what has been really interesting for me over the last 10 years is particularly for autoimmune encephalitis. I knew about encephalitis obviously as being a critical care nurse, and I'd cared for people with herpes simplex virus who were critically ill. I didn't have a huge knowledge. I could see what happened to them when they were critically ill, wasn't involved with ongoing rehabilitation of critically ill patients, so then didn't see, the ongoing residual effects, but had a bit of knowledge around viral encephalitis, but none whatsoever about autoimmune. And we'd never ever had a patient that we knew of with autoimmune encephalitis in the unit that I worked in. So when I started to find out a bit more about LGi1 and NMDAR, I realised there was so many different kinds. And even in the 10 years that I've had encephalitis, that the new tests that they've got, new antibodies that, that people didn't have a diagnosis with. Maybe these are people who had that in the past, but there wasn't an actual test for it. I found that fascinating and learned a bit more about it, because I think, medical research is still advancing. And I think that's where also Encephalitis International is pivotal in that, supporting people with all these new diagnoses and different types, even like we've got tick-borne encephalitis now as well. It's a really interesting area of medicine. Do you want me to just go on about what treatment I had, or?
Yeah, and I just want to kind of just point out that it's so isolating, when you haven't been diagnosed, and as you said, people thought you were going mad, it must have been such a lonely experience. And then the diagnosis, it's more than a diagnosis. It almost connects you with everyone. Now everyone can understand with you what's been going on. I just think that's, yeah, diagnosis is so important. And so yeah, if we could move on to the treatments.
So when I got my diagnosis, then it was back to hospital, and starting steroid therapy. So I was on a huge dose of prednisolone, the steroids that they used to treat autoimmune encephalitis, and that wasn't without its problems. Obviously, there are side effects, and I got them, which was challenging. But when you know that treatment is what's going to help you and make you better, you just go with it. I had the insomnia. My appetite didn't hugely increase, but I had the cushingoid side effects, which is your face puffs up and swells. You can feel a bit itchy. I struggled with the change in my appearance because, for want of a better phrase, I blew up like a balloon. My clothes didn't fit. Seems like quite trivial things, but when you're a female, maybe men feel the same, but I looked so different. And in some ways, that actually, there was a benefit when you're unwell to looking different, because with a brain injury, it's an invisible condition. People don't see it a lot of the time. So you look the same. So when I had the steroids and I blew up like a balloon, they could see that there was something not quite right with. Maybe didn't know what it was, but they could see, and then you could explain a bit more easier when it's not invisible. I would say my personality changed as well. Probably a bit of both with encephalitis and steroids. It might not seem like it, but I was quite a shy person and probably didn't speak a huge amount. And suddenly, when I was in steroids, I was at 100 miles an hour. And I talked 100 to the dozen. And it was really chatty. Also had no filter. So things that, as an ICU nurse and being a charge nurse coordinating a unit, there's a lot that stays in there that you don't verbalise, but I didn't have that anymore. And once I was back at my work, they all thought this was a bit funny in a kind way, that I suddenly said things that I never said before. And how it was how it was, and it came out, and they could see the change in my personality during that phase. And some of them still laugh about it. So they do. And to an extent, I think I've kind of come out my shell a bit more. If you said to me I would be speaking at conferences and various things before that, yeah, no. But I think my family would say also I'm a different person. And that's not always a bad thing. So it's not. I'm definitely more chattier, and I'm open about what's happened to me and been able to share my experience. I think it shaped the change in my career as well, in that I understand now what it's like to have been a patient, to have been not critically ill, but very unwell, and what that feels like as a person. And also the benefit of the support I've had has actually shaped me to go on to still work in critical care, but also now I'm a critical care recovery coordinator, so I do rehab. My job is to support patients and families in their rehab and critical illness. And I also help with the peer support group for that. And that's been shaped through my own experience and my involvement with Encephalitis International, actually. So although something awful has happened to me, there's been a lot of good come out of it.
Yeah.
And that's actually really helped me. I did say I might get upset.
That's all right, Pauline.
Wasn't quite expecting it,
Mm.
but actually, that has actually been quite cathartic in my journey. That I've been able to support other people who are going through something similar, or in the case of somebody with encephalitis, the same thing. Because since I've been doing this role, there's actually been a couple of people who have supported who've had encephalitis themselves. In particular, the chairwoman of our ICU steps group had encephalitis, not the same kind as me. But when I spoke to her family while she was critically ill, and they saw me being a nurse actually working, was that was huge for them. I did make it clear that I didn't know how she would recover, but it gave them some hope that their mum actually could make a recovery, and she did, and she's the chairwoman of our group, which is great.
That's just wonderful.
Mm.
Wow. Th Pauline, this is just incredible because you've been at the bedside to the bed, and now you're back at the bedside, and you have a reinforced sense of helping. I mean, you left school, went straight to nursing, and it's just become even stronger since you've had encephalitis. I think it's just, for me, it's just really inspiring to just hear your story. And I know we can go on about the story side of things, but I do want to kind of move on to the volunteering side of things. So I was wondering what the connection was from this to becoming a volunteer.
I first kind of knew about Encephalitis International, or at that time it was called the Encephalitis Society, was actually while I was unwell in hospital. My husband was at home trying to find out a bit more about what could be making me unwell, and he came across the website. So the website has hugely developed in 10 years. It was unrecognizable, as is technology. So there was it was more, at that point, it was more medical information we were looking at, and both being healthcare professionals, because he's a retired physiotherapist now, but obviously was a physiotherapist at the time. We were interested in research and treatments at that point. So there was a lot of information. So at that point, it was more the medical side initially. So we were reading up about the information that was on the website about LGi1. Once I got that diagnosis, and that kind of that led us to the website and what was available, because if I didn't know about Encephalitis International existed till we did Dr. Google and looked at that. So that kind of led us onto the website. Sorry, and we linked in at that point. Realised there was support, and there was sort of more information, and sort of read about people's stories. There wasn't videos at that point, and the meetings were all in person. And in Scotland, it's quite a large geographical area, and I live in the west coast of Scotland. So getting to meetings was going to be a bit difficult, but there was some peer support. I didn't really enter into that until I was back at work, and sort of I can't say I've ever been back to normal, because life's different. And then I sort of started finding a bit more about it, and I was asked to do a story, and then did a bit of raising awareness first, and then it's just developed from there. And I've done a wee bit of everything really, with regarding volunteering.
Yeah, we were talking in the green room, as it were, about how you started with the peer support groups in
Yeah,
Scotland.
yeah. So, well, I actually went initially. I mean, there's a lot of bad about COVID. there's a lot of negatives, but one of the positives is the Zoom meetings, which were really just starting at that point and were quite infrequent. And that was my way to link in, being, you know, geographically a bit isolated. So I kind of started with that. And then obviously during COVID and lockdown, everybody went online and the meetings they were actually very regular because people were so isolated at that point. I was in the full throes of COVID, being a critical care nurse, but I still tried to go to meetings because I felt that was for me and that was beneficial. Hearing other people's story is hugely underestimated, and the power of peer support as a nurse, really, that was a big change for me to hear the benefit and actually experience that. I didn't really get the value of that, and I think it's developed generally in the last 10 years, but that was a big thing. Hearing other people's stories, resonating, talking to somebody else who'd had a condition. You know, everybody kind of knows somebody who's had a heart attack, or they know somebody who knows somebody and they can talk to. I didn't know anybody with encephalitis, so that was a big thing. And once I got the benefit of that, I felt to me, it was just the right natural thing to then support other people, because I knew I'd got quite a lot from it myself. And it kind of, the role just developed from there. The Scotland group kind of came about from the national meetings getting bigger and realising that actually local branches was also a good thing. So I had been at a brain injury awareness day where I was promoting encephalitis, and I met Paul, who was one of the other volunteers. I don't think I actually had met him at that point. And it was nice to spend a whole day with somebody chatting. And then they realised actually we were quite a good match, and they asked us to co-host the Scotland groups. So we've been doing that. I can't tell you exactly how long, but a fair number of years. And we do them every second month. And then sporadically we try and have in-person meetings. We've got, it's not a huge group, and I actually think that's a good thing, because everybody gets their voices heard in a smaller group, and they get a chance to speak individually. They're not just listening the whole time, and but the in-person meetings are bigger. But I think that works well with the in-person meetings, because you're in a bigger room. If you want to break into smaller groups, that's okay. And we're actually having another in-person meeting in a couple of months' time as well. But we've got a core group of people who come and attend every month, and then we've got other people who dip in and out as they want, which is absolutely fine. I really enjoy doing them. I find it's not, oh God, I've got another meeting. It's oh, that's great, we've got another meeting, and I get a lot from it as well. So I do. I enjoy doing that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And how has your kind of role as a volunteer evolved over the years?
So I've been roped into a lot of things over the years I've been volunteering. I've been doing the peer support meetings. I've raised awareness through the stand I was just briefly touching on. So I do awareness. Annually, Paul and I go to a brain injury awareness day in Glasgow. We have a stand, and we have all the promotional materials, information, and that raises awareness, both professionally and so it's both professional and for patients. It's a big event, and there's a lot of people go, so we cover quite a good range of different people, and share quite a lot of information. World Encephalitis Day is obviously a big event. I'm going to stand up and show you my T-shirt, which I proudly wear every year. And obviously, if we're at events, I've got several T-shirts over the years. I could probably do a wee museum of T-shirts for encephalitis. I'm involved in that. I have really since that's probably how I first actually got involved with volunteering. I was asked in, I think it was 2017, just before I had my second encounter with encephalitis, we lit a building up locally in Kilmarnock, which was a clock, and I noticed it went red. It changed colour, and it's at the top of probably the busiest street in town, at the train station, and I was, oh, that goes red, and I was able to get that lit up red, and we were promoting the story. It got caught on to through Encephalitis International press release, and the Scottish television news took up the story. It was a bit of a whirlwind of a day that day. I got a phone call. I thought it was a hoax from, I don't know if it was John maybe, that phoned me from headquarters saying, what are you doing before you go to this flower clock? And I was like, no, I'm not doing anything. Can we bring some television cameras to do a little newsreel? And I was like, are you really? So that's what happened. I had TV cameras in my house. I had to go and put makeup on, fix my hair. Actually, one of my friends came and supported me because she knew the newsreader who was doing it.
Oh, wow.
Just through Scottish football. And so she came and supported me, and it went on Scottish National News. They came up to the flower clock. We did a little bit of a newsreel there, and they also had a chat with me in the house about my story. So I went on the Scottish News, and everything kind of probably really snowballed from there. So every year I do something locally to raise awareness. Our local castle gets lit up red, and it's beautiful. And it goes on social media. So there's that awareness through social media as well, which is good because I can get people to share things, now, which is a wide audience, as you know. So I also have, I'm looking at my little bits of notes here, spoke at conferences. So I've spoke at My Brain, My Story when it was in Edinburgh a number of years ago. And I've also spoke at a nursing conference talking about encephalitis and also my experience as being a nurse with it. I also tried to raise awareness of the autoimmune antibodies, and I was kindly given the graph that one of the neurologists shared with me of the timeline of how it's developed, and that one slide's just amazing for people to see how things have developed in the last 15 years. And the latest thing I've done was I was also on I was a PPI, so patient participant involvement of a drug research trial, which was really interesting. Not just as a patient, but obviously with my nursing background. Unfortunately, that study had to end because they didn't get enough recruitment. It went through COVID, and that was a particularly difficult time, and they couldn't meet the deadlines. And that was for immunoglobulin, which was a treatment that I'd had. So that was why I was asked to be involved, because I'd actually had that treatment on both of my encounters with encephalitis. So who knows what's happening next? I'm here today, obviously, as well. doing this podcast, and I will continue my involvement both as a peer support and raising awareness. I've been at a few of the conferences and I found them really enjoyable as well, and also sort of promote the volunteering role, because I think that's hugely important for people to also develop as they develop and recover from their encephalitis, that if they want to continue, that they can also volunteer, because I've found it hugely rewarding.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, actually. What things did you gain from your volunteering experience?
I think when somebody's heard your voice and listened and supported you, you get a lot from that you in turn want to do that for somebody else. I think it's as simple as giving back something that you've received that other people can't do. Only people who've been through what you've been through can do that. So I would say that's probably my key driver. Having had that peer support myself and knowing how powerful it is. Definitely.
Yeah. Wow, that's wonderful. You have touched on this earlier, but I do want to kind of flesh it out a bit more. And I was wondering, just being a nurse and a volunteer, like how has nursing specifically helped with your volunteering path?
Good question. I think sometimes having a lot of knowledge isn't always a good thing when you're a patient, because you kind of look into a lot of things. But
I suppose you would empathize, because you've been in that
yes.
situation, and yeah, I don't know.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think when people speak to me, patients speak to me, I resonate with what they're feeling and what they're experiencing. Having been a patient in a hospital for a month, particularly the first time, it wasn't so long the second time, and I was actually chatting to someone earlier about my ICU volunteering role with the support group is when you lose control of what's happening to you and you are entirely at the mercy of the people who are caring for you and treating you, and you have no control. I fully understand that now. When you're in hospital, your whole day revolves around, you wake up, you're told, here's your drugs, you need to get washed, it's your lunch, this is happening. You don't have a lot of control over that, and that's quite difficult. And particularly as a nurse who's usually somebody who's delivering that was a huge thing for me to then be able to understand what it feels like. And I have to be careful in my job role when I'm speaking to patients, because you don't want to divulge things and also then think it's about me, because it's not, it's about them. But having that empathy and understanding just by knowing what it feels like. Occasionally I will allude to hospital food and having knowledge of that without saying too much. You can touch on little things that seem like little things but are actually quite important to people. Like, hospital food is not great, and it's quite important to people, food, when you're unwell. And I kind of allude to it there, how that feels, about getting nutrition. And if they complain, it's not sort of conversation I'd strike up, but if they sort of mention it and you go, I have had that experience, I do understand. And I maybe allude occasionally, depending whether it's appropriate, to somebody who's been in hospital for a while, and I'll say, I have had personal experience of being in hospital for a month. I've not been critically ill, but I understand how it feels to be in hospital for a long time, because it is a long time, that length of time. And sometimes that is how long you need to be in hospital. But it is difficult being away from your family. And for me in particular, I wasn't in my own town. Glasgow's sort of 25, 30 miles away from where I stay. Even though there is a hospital sort of 3 miles along the road. That I found that quite difficult, actually. So, understanding how that is, yeah, it's definitely had an impact. And that, me changing not career, but changing my focus in my career to that has been shaped through both my experience and the peer support, and how important that is for patients.
Yes.
Offering it to them. Not everybody wants to take that, and that's understandable, but knowing that these options are there for them in the future, particularly while they're still unwell, I think gives people some sort of reassurance and comfort that as their journey continues, that they still have ongoing support when they leave hospital. And probably I didn't appreciate when I left hospital myself that was as how it is now. I think that would definitely have given me more reassurance, that my journey continued, but with support. We talk about in our ICU peer support group that it's not a destination. There's the end point of your illness. It's a journey. And I think for me, that has probably only fully become apparent because obviously I had a situation last year where I had a side effect of my encephalitis that I wasn't expecting. Albeit it was short, we've dealt with it and everything's okay. It did come back and catch up with me. And having support definitely helped.
Yeah. And yeah, as you say, recovery is definitely a journey. It's better to think of it as a journey rather than something to work toward, like a destination. Yeah. And actually that leads me on to my last question, which is for anyone who might be watching who might be recovering from encephalitis themselves, what advice would you give?
You don't have all day for me to talk. There's lots of things. I think knowing that there's support there, knowing there's help, the helpline's there. John's amazing, and Delina, and anybody else who goes on, supports patients on that helpline. The website's fantastic now. The amount of information is phenomenal, and particularly the videos and the stories. I've not watched all of them because there's a lot, but specific to the condition that you've got, your particular condition, whether it's HSV or autoimmune, or whichever. There's specific videos to each condition, and that's great. And I think listening to them and them resonating in some way is really good. And the community overall, with all of the meetings now, whether it be a national meeting, local, regional meeting, and also for families, we shouldn't not mention, you know, the importance it is for families to get support, and those groups are there as well, because they shouldn't be forgotten, because it has an impact on them too. And there is an element of guilt when it's happened to you that has on. Sorry, I didn't expect that.
That's okay, Pauline.
So having all of these support options is great. Please, if you're not sure about using them, what I would say to people is definitely go onto the website, have a look, and see there's loads of different options for support. See what works for you, because it's not a one size fits all. There are, you know, whether it's the Connect scheme, it's joining in a Zoom meeting, or asking for individual support, or phoning, you know, the helpline. There are lots of different options. I would also say be kind to yourself. I think that's really important. And not, I've been particularly hard on myself with my memory. I often go, oh, it's my encephalitis brain. And then my colleagues will go, that's normal, that's not your encephalitis brain. But you kind of, you know, blame it for that. And actually, that's, we all don't function at 100% all of the time. Use strategies if you do have memory problems. That's probably one of the biggest things that has helped me, particularly over the 10 years. Obviously, I'm using my phone more, you know, notes on your phone, or I'm actually really good at, I like to write things down, and I use lists. I was always a list writer, and I find that really helpful, and I have a planner. But using your phone, particularly at the beginning when I was on steroids and lots of other anti-seizure medication, using a phone reminder when you needed to take your medication, particularly if I was at work. I know at that time I would be working 12-hour shifts. If I had a phone reminder, I needed to go and take my medication. These are all strategies. There's lots of strategies for memory problems. And again, through the videos, somebody might just speak about something and go, yeah, I think that would work for me. Yeah, I think that's the kind of main things I would say.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. There's a lot in there, and yeah, lot of nuggets of gold in that. So thank you so much for sharing that. Um,
Good.
we have come to the end of the podcast. So before we finish, is there anything that we haven't discussed that you'd like to mention? We've talked about volunteering, and your stories. Yeah, is there anything that you'd like to kind of say?
I think, yeah, I think the only thing I would say for me, and this might not be what other, although I think it has comes up in our group meeting. And I was chatting about this with somebody earlier in another meeting, is driving. Not being able to drive for me was a huge thing. And it is something that we chat about regularly. This will be the third time that I am currently not able to drive due to having encephalitis twice and having seizures and having to give up my license. And then recently, when I had that one episode of having a seizure, having to surrender my driving license. When you've driven since you were 18, not been able to drive changes your life. I was lucky I was able to get to work because I live really close to the hospital I work in, and I can use transport, but that can be difficult for some people. And that loss of independence and relying on other people. I know other people have felt the same and spoken about it, but people are always willing to help you. You know, it's just you getting used to having to ask to do that. I think it's more you asking than the person not are not going to not want to do it, but it's difficult if you're used to not just jumping in a car and going somewhere. And then the joys of dealing with the DVLA of getting your license back when your year's up is not without its challenges. And I've been able to sort of understand other people's woes of that because I've been through it twice, and I'm hopefully soon going to go through reapplying for my driving license for the third time. I found it difficult, but I'm still smiling because you get there eventually and you adapt and you find ways around it. I certainly have been walking a lot more since I've not been able to drive as well. So there's a health benefit as well.
Oh, that's a nice positive note there.
Yeah,
And yeah, and good luck as well. I hope
thank
you
you.
let me know how it goes.
I will need it.
Yeah. Well, I think we've come to the end of this podcast, Pauline. I'd like to thank you so much for sharing your valuable time with us. Thank you so much, Pauline.
Thank you for listening.
And I'd like to thank you, the audience, for watching. We hope you found this episode of the Encephalitis podcast helpful. If you have been affected by any of the issues raised, please contact our support line. Encephalitis International is here to help and support in whatever way we can. For more information, as well as our contact details, please visit our website, www.encephalitis.info. And together we can achieve our aim of ending death and disability from encephalitis. You can also find all the information you need in the podcast description. As always, if you can support our work, we would be extremely grateful. Please visit www.encephalitis.info/donate. Thank you again, and see you next time on the Encephalitis podcast. All right, stop.